What's so strange is how is atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, other vascular disease, obesity and diabetes and cancer and macular degeneration, what connects all of these things together? It's mitochondrial dysfunction. And
Exactly.
everybody knows this. We're being poisoned. We're being poisoned. And that's what these industrial seed oils do to us. They poison us, and they've been grandfathered into our food supply. And no one questions them because they came in very, very slowly. We very, very slowly became overweight and sick. If we would have went from 0 seed oils and all of a sudden put 80 grams per person per day of seed oils in the food supply, we would have been so sick so fast, and everybody would have connected it. But what happened is it grew from 0 to 80 grams a day over 145 years.
Welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe. I'm Lisa Roars, your host, and hey, thanks for joining me today. I'm here just to pour some positive back into your day with practical tips and stories to encourage and inspire. So let's dive in. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe. I'm Lisa Roars, your host, and my guest today is one of the world's leading voices in the connection between nutrition and chronic disease. And he's a leading authority on those hidden health hazards that we call seed oils. Dr. Kenobi is a respected ophthalmologist and former associate clinical professor at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. He's also a published researcher, a TEDx speaker, founder of the Ancestral Health Foundation, the Cure AMD Foundation, and author of the Ancestral Diet Revolution. Dr. Kenobi has a compelling hypothesis about processed seed oils, something I would guess can be found in your kitchen right now. And the data he's collected paints a compelling argument about how processed seed oils are perhaps the primary driver behind chronic diseases that are interrupting our lives, the lives of you and I and our loved ones, including obesity and type 2 diabetes and heart attacks, but also cancer, Alzheimer's, dementia, and autoimmune diseases, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, depression, and AMD, which is actually age-related macular degeneration, which is a big word, but the bottom line is it's stealing our eyesight. In fact, it's the leading cause of irreversible vision loss. So what if all of these things are tied to something that we're all ignoring? Well, Dr. Kenobi's work and his latest book, The Ancestral Diet Revolution, is rooted in science, backed by rigorous research, and is delivered with a deep and a very authentic passion to just help people and to educate them so they can reclaim their health. If this episode can open your eyes to something you didn't know was contributing to your health issues, well, then it might just be the most encouraging episode I could possibly give you. And so, with no further ado, I'm so honored to welcome you to the show, Dr. Chris Kenobi. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's an honor and a pleasure to be on your show. I'm embarrassed by long introductions, but thank you so much. It's really kind.
Well, you've done so much in the industry, and I think, the series that we're doing is talking about hidden health hazards, and knowing is the first step to making a change in our health. And I think sometimes the information is really hard to find. There's so much noise out there right now about what is good for us and what is bad for us, and do we do high carb or low carb, or it's all over the place. It's very confusing for the regular everyday citizen. So maybe we can back up a little bit and talk a little bit about how you got into this topic. You've got a wealth of history with your ophthalmologist practice and all of that. So tell us a little bit about what got you into this study.
Yeah, well, in a couple of words, it's my own suffering that got me here. And for me, Lisa, that was primarily arthritis. I started developing arthritis about 30 years ago when I was 33 years old. And it became really severe over the years. And I saw numerous colleague physicians. I'm a traditionally trained, allopathic physician specialized in ophthalmology, eye surgery. So I had all sorts of friends, family doctors, orthopedic surgeons, rheumatologists, on, and they had all treated me with, the usual routine kind of drugs, injectables, oral, whatnot, for this arthritis pain, but eventually by the time I was 50, it was just everywhere. And I was in dreadful shape, and I didn't know anything about nutrition. This was 14 years ago. And so but anyway, I started a partial paleo diet, and within about 7 to 10 days, I was about 80, 90% better.
Wow.
This was something I'd suffered for 17 years, and I'm not saying and I didn't have a cure completely. Actually, I'm still tweaking it, but anyway, this was so life changing for me that it sent me down a path to try to understand nutrition. And so that was for me, that was in early 2011. And by 2013, I was really, for the next couple of years, I was kind of, I was learning a lot about nutrition, but I was really kind of lost. And because like you just said in your opening, that, there's so many conflicting theories. And I went down the low carb path and those kind of things. And it wasn't until I came across the work of Weston A. Price that I felt like, for the first time, I had a deep understanding of nutrition. Well, maybe I shouldn't say deep, but I had a good framework to view nutrition through. And because I knew then that, processed foods, mostly refined flours, refined sugars, vegetable oils, and Weston Price, included canned goods, sweets, confectionery, these sorts of things, processed foods as drivers of degenerative disease. And anyway, so I basically, that changed the course of my life. And I began later that year, and that was 2013. Later that year, I began to, it finally hit me that I was understanding how processed foods were driving all of this chronic disease, like coronary heart disease, cancer, stroke, dementia, diabetes, and so on. I was connecting all that. But the thing that had never, ever been proffered, the hypothesis that had never been proffered, was that processed foods might be driving age-related macular degeneration, AMD, which is the leading cause of irreversible vision loss and blindness in people over the age of 50 worldwide, as you just mentioned in your opening even. And so that idea also changed my life. That was in 2013. So I researched that for about a year and a half while I was still in practice. And by February of 2015, I was so convinced that that hypothesis was tenable, not that it was provable, but I felt like it was, there was enough evidence that I needed to pursue it full time by that point, almost 200 million people have macular degeneration today, and hundreds of them go blind in both eyes every day. Like, it's over 500 people per day are going blind in this world from AMD. And so I just felt like I needed to pursue this. So I left practice, pursued that full time. And within another year and a half, basically, we had evidence in 25 nations. We had data in 25 nations on seed oil and sugar consumption in relation to the prevalence of AMD. And basically, every country that supported the hypothesis, as sugar and vegetable oils went up, AMD went way up. But the real kicker was that it was strongly tied to the vegetable oils, not sugar. Anyway, so I published a paper, a book, started a nonprofit foundation. But by a couple of years later, by 2018, 2019, I just was coming back to this broad picture that what is driving all this? And there was almost nobody talking about the dangers of vegetable oils, of edible, refined, bleached, and deodorized industrial seed oils. And so that's what I started to focus on, because I just knew there was a need there. And so now for about 6 or 7 years, I've been heavily focused on the relationship between industrial seed oils and all of these diseases. Again, coronary heart disease, cancer, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, Alzheimer's, dementia, age-related macular degeneration, autoimmune diseases. And the correlations between all of these are astoundingly high.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else. I'll just say this, and we can get to some of this, but there isn't anything else in the food supply that correlates like the vegetable oils do to all this disease, including, sugar, carbohydrates, even refined carbohydrates, which are not good, and neither is sugar. But I should include GMOs, glyphosate, herbicides, pesticides, EMFs, almost anything you can think of. If you look at, you need correlation to prove causation. And the one thing that we have really strong correlation with, between obesity, diabetes, and all these diseases is vegetable oils.
Mm.
So anyway, I kind of rambled on a little long. That's a little long there, but that's where my life has been over the last, 14 years I've been working at this, full time for the last decade.
Yeah, we have the skills for research and you have the background that really helps to make that make sense. And that's what we need. We, the people who don't have those skills, we need someone like you who knows what to look at and what to correlate and how to get that data. So let's pause for a second on that and talk about what seed oils are. The industrial, you mentioned the refined, bleached, and deodorized seed oils. Let's talk about really quickly what those are, because there's, again, confusion about there are oils that are good for us that technically are kind of seed oils, and there are oils that are really bad for us. And unfortunately, we use the same word for both things. We can talk about that more later. But when you're talking about seed oils, can you list off what you're referring to?
Yes. Well, so for the list, my worst of the worst list would be soybean, corn, canola, cottonseed, rapeseed, grapeseed, sunflower, safflower, rice bran, sesame, and peanut oils. And sesame and peanut oils are far better, and we can get into the details, but these are all seed oils. All of those come from seeds, even soybeans, which is, a bean, but beans are a seed.
Mm.
So these are oils most of these come from seeds that humans would not even consume. Like, in the United States, seed oils were introduced into the food supply in 1866, and they were introduced with cottonseed oil. And if you think about this, at the time, Americans did not want to consume cottonseed oil because, there were several applications for seed oils and none of them were in food. Cottonseed oil was used as lamp oil, machine oil, and then fertilizer at that time, up through the end of the American Civil War, ending in 1865. And so when manufacturers started to try to sell cottonseed oil to consumers, they really weren't interested. They weren't really having it.
Right. It'd be like if we decided to put Valvoline into our current food supply,
Exactly.
right? We're not
Yeah,
having that.
precisely. Yeah. And so the manufacturers weren't really, that didn't deter them enough though. So what they did was they began to adulterate olive oil is what they did. And that was one of the first things that they did to try to make sales. And there was a lot of this going on in the 1870s. And again, without disclosing that there's cottonseed oil in this so-called olive oil. In fact, we shipped, I think it was 74,000 barrels of so-called olive oil that was supposed to have come out of California. And I don't even think we had anywhere near the capacity to produce anywhere near that amount of olive oil at the time. But anyway, the French made official complaint to the United States in the year 1880 because they knew that what they were getting was not olive oil. They could taste it, that it did not taste like olive oil. And they knew it was adulterated. And they made official complaint, and that stopped the exportation of cottonseed oil internationally out of the United States for the most part, or it brought a huge halt to it, at least for some countries like France.
Wow.
But anyway, so eventually 1909, soybean oil was introduced, which added a great deal to the consumption of Americans for a lot of reasons. And then again, all the other oils that I mentioned, so by the end of the 20th century, all of those oils had been introduced.
Hmm.
And with that, what happened is with that came all of these chronic diseases. Essentially, all the ones I named early on, we didn't really have any of those in the 19th century. And it wasn't because people didn't live to be elderly. They did. I mean, in huge numbers. And there's all sorts of data to back that up.
Mhm.
Because when people will, one of the first things they'll say is, well, we didn't live long enough to get heart disease, cancer, and all that. And that is absolutely false. I can tell you data like from England and Wales. And, for example, in England and Wales in 1900, I think it was 30 some percent of the population was still alive at around age 80, right?
Right.
The reason that we, when people look at the life expectancy at birth of a population and they see that in the United States, it was like roughly 49.2 years, I think, in 1900. That's because the childhood death rate was extremely high at that time.
Mm.
So like and I'll give you numbers, like in 1800, 43.3% of the world's children did not live to see their fifth birthday. And in
Wow.
1900, it wasn't much better. In 1900, 36.2% of the world's children did not live to see their fifth birthday.
Wow.
Even in Sweden, which was the most advanced country in the world at that time, I think it was 22% of the children in Sweden died before their fifth birthday.
Mm.
And then another in the United States, 4% of women would have died in childbirth. Uh,
Wow.
roughly around four. It was about 1 to 1.5% risk of death for the mother
Mhm.
in childbirth in the year 1900 in the United States. And that typical woman gave birth to 6 or 7 children. So a typical risk was around 4% risk for a mother to die
Yeah.
at a very young age, in their 20s or 30s. So you put that together, and this is why the life expectancy is so low. But
Yeah.
anyway, we can come back to it if you want to. But all of those conditions, coronary heart disease, cancer, diabetes, they're all almost unknown to rare, very rare.
Yeah.
All those conditions, all of them.
Right. Well, and the argument that they didn't live old enough wouldn't hold anyway because we've got children now getting cancer. We've got children getting type 2 diabetes. We have really young people getting hit with heart attacks and all these different diseases. And when you start looking at the trends of all these diseases, it's obvious that something has changed. And the correlation and the numbers that you have that suggest causation from the seed oils is really compelling. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And you also mentioned, that the way that we had kind of adulterated the olive oil and sent that over to France and they have like rejected it. But we're still doing the same thing today. We're adulterating
Mhm.
olive oil with canola oil. In fact, if you go to your restaurants and you ask them what is in your olive oil, it will say canola oil and olive oil. It's a blend because it's cheaper, right? So it
Yeah.
all comes back to the profit and how much money these companies are able to make. And I want people who are listening to understand that all these seed oils, you think, well, okay, I won't cook with seed oil. But anytime you have any fried food in any restaurant, I can almost guarantee it's going to be fried in canola oil. Everything you eat out is going to be used with canola oil. There's
Or
just,
soybean.
or soybean oil. Yes. Yes. There's so much of
Yeah.
it out there. So even if we think we're not cooking with it or we're trying to be more aware of it, it is so prolific in our food production right now that you can't buy bread without finding seed oils in it. Breads, crackers, anything you buy on the store shelves has canola oil or some kind of seed oil in it. It's really alarming when you start looking at what the potential connections to our bad health are with these seed oils and how prolific it is because it's just making those companies money over and over, hand over fist. They're making money from it.
Let me throw in here, if I
Yeah.
could, Lisa. Let me give your viewers or your listeners some numbers on this. In the United States, for example, we didn't have a single seed oil in 1865, up through 1865. Americans had never had an opportunity to consume any kind of seed oil. The only oil that would have been available for consumption would have been olive oil, and almost no one had that either, because there was almost no olive trees through the 1860s that could produce olive oil. And because transportation was so slow, by boat, by ship at that time, Americans didn't have an opportunity to really get hardly any oils whatsoever. They all cooked with animal fats, lard, butter, and beef tallow. That's what they cooked in.
Hmm.
Everything was cooked in that. They didn't have any plant fats at all to cook in. right? No one would have cooked in olive oil at that time. If they had olive oil, it was most likely in their cosmetics,
Mm.
and very few people could even afford that. Anyway, so the point is we had zero. The consumption of seed oils, or almost any edible oil, was almost zero, is probably far less than a tenth of a gram per person per day in 1865. So in 1866, it enters the food supply, cottonseed oil, and we have about roughly 1 gram per person per day, and that holds pretty steady until 1908. 1909, soybean oil was introduced, and our consumption immediately went up to 9 grams per person per day in that year, because Procter and Gamble had introduced Crisco, and that's where most of it was coming from, was Crisco. Okay, so we're at 9 grams a day in 1909. By 1960, we're at 19 grams per person per day. All right. So we're already, well, you see, we've gone way up, right? By 2010, we're at 80 grams per person per day of vegetable oil consumption, total vegetable oil consumption. And in 2010, 89% of that consumed oil is seed oils, industrial seed oils, all the ones I named before, with the remainder, the other 11% being made up of a little bit of olive oil, which is about 2.5 to 3% of the consumption, and then coconut oil, a little bit of palm oil, and palm kernel oil. That's about it. That's what makes up the remainder, 11%. So back to 2010, 80 grams per person per day. That's 720 calories on average. That's 32% of US caloric intake. Now, this is the amount of food that reaches the consumer. And this data comes from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the most trusted database in the world for food consumption. And so 720 calories, 32% of US caloric intake. That's the amount, again, that gets to your kitchen and, or, to your mouth, essentially, for the most part. But there's some plate losses and other cooking losses. So we're roughly, you can make, it's easy to conclude that Americans on average are consuming a fourth or more of their food from vegetable oils, which did not exist in 1865, right? A fourth to a third of the diet. This is the single greatest change to the diet of mankind in all of history. And it's applies to most of the rest of the world now, but America leads the way in vegetable oil consumption. No one consumes more vegetable oil than Americans per person per day. No. And so what's come with this is an explosion of all these diseases, and they all parallel. Like coronary heart disease was extraordinarily rare in the 19th century. I've covered this like at the Public Health Collaboration Conference just a few weeks ago. That, there was the first known case of a heart attack was in 1859 in Sweden. There was almost no cases known, as Sir William Osler reported in the 1890s. He had never witnessed a coronary heart disease death by 1897. And it's apparent, it's not even sure if he did by 1910. The first documented heart attack in the United States was documented by a physician, James B. Herrick, MD, in 1912. And yet by the 1950s, coronary heart disease was the leading cause of death in both the United States and the United Kingdom. And by 1972, I think it was 680 some thousand people were dying per year in the United States from coronary heart disease.
Yeah.
That number is down to like 380 some thousand now, but it's come down almost entirely because of smoking. So there's two main drivers, I believe, of coronary heart disease. It's vegetable oils and smoking. And we're down to, we peaked at smoking at 47%, I believe it was, in 1952. And we were at 12% recently, and I think we're around 10% or so smokers now.
Okay.
Anyway, so it's similar for cancer. So cancer deaths were in the United States, 1 in 188 people died of cancer in 1811. That increased to 1 in 17 by 1900, and it's almost 1 in 3 as of 2010. So cancer deaths went up 62-fold between 1811 and 2010. 62-fold. And I have this book right here. This book, The Natural History of Cancer. This was written by a physician, W. Roger Williams, and he reviews with extraordinary detail all the cancer prevalence around the world. And it is astonishing how low cancer deaths were. In some populations, there would be as many as 10,000 deaths, 10 to 12,000 deaths, and one of those was cancer.
Wow.
One. And many, many populations from around the world had as little as 0.2% of their deaths as cancer. In other words, 1 in 500 people. So how do
Wow.
we go from 1 in 500 or 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 deaths from cancer to today, 1 in 3,
Right.
right? And it was the same thing for age-related macular degeneration. There was less than 50 cases in all the world's literature between 1851 and 1930. And yet by 2020, 196 million people with macular degeneration.
That's crazy.
I could just go, oh, diabetes. I'll just mention diabetes and then I'll shut up. So diabetes, 1890, Sir William Osler published this. For those who don't know, Sir William Osler is the most famous physician of the last several centuries.
Mm.
He was a founding professor at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland in 1890 when the hospital was opened. And he reported in his first textbook, Principles and Practice of Medicine, that diabetes prevalence in 1890 was 0.0028% of the population. That's about 1 in 36,000 people.
Wow.
That has grown to 15.8% as of last year. That is a 5,643-fold increase in diabetes prevalence. If it had doubled, that would be statistically significant.
Wow.
If it had gone from 1 in 36,000 people to 1 in 18,000 people, that would be statistically significant for sure in anybody's statistical analyses. But it went from 1 in 36,000 people to about, I think it's 1 in 7 now,
Oh
roughly.
my goodness.
Or 1 in, whatever 15.8% is, whatever that works out to be. I think it's 1 in 6 or 1 in 7. It's something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, and you can just keep going. You start tying all this together, and you see there's these incredible correlations with seed oils, and you don't have that with sugar.
Yeah, the correlations aren't the same with sugar. It's very,
No.
very obvious when you look at the graphs. The seed
Right.
oils really stand out. I just want to recap those numbers for the listener because I think these are pretty telling that we went in 1865 from 1 gram per day per person of seed oil all the way to 2010, which we are now at 80 grams or 720 calories of our diet coming from seed oils. I think one of the confusing things about seed oils is, olive oil is a seed oil and we cook with it and it's good. There's some oils that are good. And it depends on how it's prepared, what kinds of processing it goes through. And you mentioned the word industrialized. And I think that's a key word. We look at, for example, human beings look at cars. You use the word car. And when you think of a car, I mean, that could mean a whole lot of different things. It could mean a Tesla. It could mean a truck, an F-150. It could be the word car just is related to a lot of different things. Same with a computer. It could be a Mac. It could be a Dell. It could be, there's so many different things about that computer. And we as human beings accept that. But when you talk about an oil, we have a tendency to think that all oils are the same. Or a tomato, all tomatoes are the same. Or
Yeah.
a hamburger, all hamburgers are the same, but they're not. What's in these things really sets each one of them apart. So let's talk just a little bit about the industrial side of the seed oil, the refining, the bleaching, and the deodorizing, and why that introduces so many toxicity elements that creates havoc with our systems.
Yeah, sure. Well, so first of all of those oils that I mentioned before, soybean, corn, canola, cottonseed, grapeseed, sunflower, safflower, rice bran, sesame, and peanut. I call those the seed oils.
Well, you
Then
just rattled those
well,
off so fast. You've obviously said those a few times.
I've said, yeah, you can tell I've said that a
Yeah.
thousand times. Okay, so then I would categorize the fruit oils separately. So that would be olive oil and avocado oil primarily. That's the two main fruit oils.
Okay.
And these are much, much, much better. And let me come back to why. Then you have the tropical oils, palm kernel, and coconut. And of those, I would say in general that you're far better off with the fruit oils or the tropical oils than you would be any of the industrial seed oils. Far better off. Why? Well, mostly because of the processing, and secondly, because of the omega-6 content. So omega-6 linoleic acid, or LA, is the primary omega-6 fat in any fat, okay? Any fat that comes from nature. And so omega-6 linoleic acid accounts for around 90% of the omega-6 fat in any fat, all right? Omega-6 linoleic acid. And for example, in the seed oils that I mentioned, that long list, those run the gamut in terms of omega-6 linoleic acid from about 20% in canola oil all the way up to 78% in safflower oil. Soybean oil, the single most utilized, consumed edible oil in the United States by far, is about 54 to 56% omega-6 LA. All right. Okay. Now, the fruit oils, like olive oil, averages about 10% omega-6 LA, but it ranges from about 3% to 27%. That's a big range. All right. Avocado oil is about 14% omega-6 LA. Now, keep in mind, the problem with olive oil and avocado oil primarily in our world is that they're still being adulterated with cheap seed oils like canola oil and soybean oil, right? That's the primary problem with those. Otherwise, I would give those, a big thumbs up.
Mhm.
Okay, let's go to the tropical oils. So you've got palm kernel, and coconut oil. Palm oil, it's only 10% omega-6 LA, but it's highly processed. It goes through refining, bleaching, and deodorizing, and is heated now in almost all factories. It's heated multiple times to deodorize it. And so I've got a lot of evidence to suggest it's not a good oil. But palm kernel and coconut oil, they're both 2% omega-6 linoleic acid, and these are super oils to consume. And now let's contrast all that with the natural animal fats that almost all humans consume throughout almost all history, because the enormous majority of the world, without getting into a ton of detail, did not have any access to seed oils. Almost no one did. So they've been there for thousands of years, up to 10,000 years, that we've had some different oils, some olive oil, coconut oil, palm oil, and safflower oil in tiny amounts here and there. Let's not get into the nitty gritty, but they're there for thousands of years. I'm not saying they weren't, but tiny, tiny, tiny amounts.
Yeah.
And so the animal fats, though, okay, let's say beef tallow, right? One of our major cooking fats throughout history.
Which is the fat that actually McDonald's used to use. They used to use tallow in their fries.
That's what they cooked their fries in until the late 1980s, I think it was. Yeah, beef tallow. And beef tallow is about 1.5 to 2.5% omega-6 LA.
That's
all right.
Low, right?
Compare that to soybean oil at 56% omega-6 LA.
Yeah.
All right. Butter is about 1.5 to 2% omega-6 LA. Milk fat would be, very, very low. It's because, again, that's where you're getting butter from, right? So it's really low in omega-6 LA. Eggs raised naturally from chickens that are consuming their natural diet, which means they're not fed corn and soy. They also have extremely low LA. It's like 1.5, 2% of their fat, 2.5%, somewhere in there. All right. So anyway, think about that. In other words, most of the natural animal fats, you're getting about 1.5 to 3% omega-6 LA. And on average, from the industrial seed oils, you're getting about 42% omega-6 LA. Why is this a problem? Because the omega-6 LA, this is just one of the problems with seed oils, but it accumulates as you consume it. It accumulates in your body, it accumulates in your body fat, and accumulates in your cell membranes, inner mitochondrial membranes. And we go from where we should be is under 3% of our total body fat should be omega-6 LA. And in Americans, for example, we were at 9.1% omega-6 LA in our body fat in 1959. And by 2008, we were at 21.5%
Wow.
omega-6 LA in our body fat.
Wow.
And why is that a problem? Because these are highly unsaturated fats, and unsaturated fats are subject to oxidation. Oxidation is like rusting. And this is the worst thing pretty much that can happen inside your body is oxidation. This is how arsenic kills, is because it's a pro-oxidant. And that's exactly what seed oils are. They're pro-oxidative. And so anyway, when you accumulate these omega-6 fats, then you set up an environment that's pro-oxidative, pro-inflammatory, directly toxic, and nutrient deficient, because there's no fat-soluble vitamins A, D, or K2 in any of these oils. And so I call those the 4 pillars of hazard: pro-oxidative, pro-inflammatory, toxic, and nutrient deficient. And that's what essentially drives all this. So in other words, what's actually happening is one of the major things that happens is this omega-6 LA and some of the other advanced lipid oxidation end products, I'll come back to that, they damage our mitochondria. And almost everybody knows today that all of these diseases, this is what's so strange, is how is atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, which causes heart attacks, and other vascular disease, and obesity, and diabetes, and cancer, and macular degeneration. What connects all of these things together? It's mitochondrial dysfunction.
Exactly.
And everybody knows this. Everybody knows we have insulin resistance and we have mitochondrial dysfunction. They all run together. Why is this the case? Because omega-6 LA in high amounts has been proven to damage the electron transport chain in the mitochondria, and you can't properly produce energy this way. And the cells then become insulin resistant. Then your blood sugar starts going up. You start getting sick. You start getting liver disease. You may not know it, but you're gradually progressing towards insulin resistance in the liver, fatty liver disease, heading towards metabolic syndrome, and then diabetes. And what goes with all this? All of those diseases.
Yeah.
Why do cancer patients have mitochondrial dysfunction and metabolic syndrome at very high rates? It's the same thing for macular degeneration. You think, well, it's just the eye. Why is it happening? Because everywhere you have this metabolic dysfunction. We're being poisoned.
Exactly.
We're being poisoned. And that's what these industrial seed oils do to us. They poison us, and they've been grandfathered into our food supply. And no one questions them because they came in very, very slowly. We very, very slowly became overweight and sick. And I didn't even discuss obesity, which I should. But all this has gradually happened. If we would have went from 0 seed oils, in let's say year 2000, and all of a sudden you just put 80 grams per person per day of seed oils in the food supply, we would have been so sick so fast in months to a few years. And people would have been getting metabolic syndrome and diabetes and all this and becoming obese, and everybody would have connected it. But what happened is it grew from 0 to 80 grams a day over 145 years.
Yeah, it's like the frog boiling in the pot. Where
Yeah.
little by little, we are just been boiling the insides of our bodies with
Exactly.
this poison.
Right. And I just got to mention, because I never did this, Lisa, during this podcast so far, obesity in Americans was 1.2% in men age 18 to 80 between about 1880 and 1917. Scott Allen Carson did this date. He looked at prisoners primarily in Texas and Nebraska. And they were, again, men. They didn't have any data on women, but men age 18 to 80. We had obesity of 1.2% in 1900. That obesity grew to 13.4% by 1960. It was at 30.5%, I believe, around 1999, 42.5% by 2018, in 2018, with another 31 something percent of the population overweight. So by 2018, 74% of Americans were either obese or overweight. So obesity between 1900 and 2018 elevated 35-fold. That's 3,400%,
Hmm.
right? And it went up precisely, I mean, lockstep correlation with vegetable oils. And it's doing it all over the world, all
Yeah.
over the world. As you saw my presentation at the Public Health Collaboration a few weeks ago in London, England. And I have data in 18 nations showing the same thing, in the last, from 1990 to 2022, in 18 nations that represented more than half of the world's population, that obesity and diabetes doubled. And during that time, 1990 to 2022, carbohydrate consumption in that half of the world was flat. You saw it.
Hmm.
Sugar consumption was flat and actually going down recently. But what
Hmm.
did seed oils do? I think they approximately doubled. They tripled between 1960 and 2022 in those 18 countries, tripled the vegetable oils. So the one thing that keeps going up, is around the world has been the vegetable oils.
Exactly. And they are used in a very sneaky way that makes us very addicted to the kind of foods that they are used in. So we want to constantly eat more and more and more of them. How many of us have said, I'm only going to have a couple of French fries. And by the end of the meal, we've eaten the entire huge pile that was sitting on our plate. It's an addictive food. So it's hard for us on our own accord to eat a balanced bit of it. Human beings don't always do a very good job at balance anyway. We need some omega-6s, but we don't need as many as we're getting. The whole balance between omega-6 and omega-3, what I think it's supposed to be like 1 to 1 or maybe 1 to 3 at the most. And we are up to about 1 to 25
Right.
between the omega-6s at 25 and 3 is over down at 1. And that's the wrong balance for our body. So there's so much of this that's making so much sense.
That's such an important point. What the omega-6 linoleic acid, LA, is an essential fat. There's only two essential fats that people need, and it's omega-6 LA and omega-3 alpha linolenic acid, which or ALA. That's the omega-3, and those are required. They're essential fats. All of the other fats we can make from those fats. Now, some people say, well, you have to have omega-6 linoleic acid. It's essential fat. And that's absolutely true. But no one in the world who was eating food ever had an omega-6 LA deficiency. No one,
Mhm.
not one person. So in other words, let me put it to you this way. If all you consumed was white rice and apples and oranges, things you'd think don't even have any fat pretty much, right? You will meet your omega-6 LA and your omega-3 ALA essential fatty acid requirements.
Sure.
You could live on a diet of oranges and you will get, it's crazy, right? But the nature, God made it this way, right? That you could eat anything in the world almost. You could live on a diet of popcorn and apples or something, and you're going to get your omega-6 LA and your omega-3 ALA. And this is where Americans were back in 1865. They had only 1.1% of their diet was omega-6 LA. And by 2008, 11.8% of the diet was omega-6 LA. The dose makes the poison. We went up 1,100%, 11-fold increase in omega-6 LA between 1865 and 2008. So no one has to worry about not getting their requirement of LA and ALA. You will get them if you eat food. Just
Right.
don't eat a lab prepared food that has 100% of the fat removed. And which
Exactly.
no one can ever get that anyway. They'd have to be some chemist or something working in a lab specifically trying to make that happen.
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
that last phrase you said is so powerful that it's the dose that makes the poison. I
Yeah.
mean, we even in our water, in our city water, there are levels of poisons in there like arsenic and different things like that because
Absolutely.
they're at such a low dose that
Yeah.
our bodies can handle them. But when you start overloading the body with too much of one thing, our bodies don't handle it well. And your whole point about the seed oils propelling the oxidation in our
Yeah.
body
Right.
it makes a lot of sense. So I know we are getting short on time, but I just want to make sure that before we wrap up that we give our audience some things, some actions that they can take. It's so prolific and you can't avoid all of it, but any small improvements are going to help reduce that heavy load that's going into our systems and disrupting our mitochondrial functioning. So what kinds of things would you recommend people do to try to start eliminating some of those seed oils in their diets?
Yeah, good question. I'm glad we're going to talk about this because it's so important. And the thing is, you have to get processed foods out of your diet, and
Yeah.
then you just need to start watching what your fats are. And honestly, by far and away, the best way to improve your diet and get rid of seed oils and refined grains and sugars, for the most part, is to prepare your own food. I know it's not easy, and I know that for people working full time and it's not easy, but the knowledge gives you power if you will utilize that knowledge, right? The
Right.
knowledge gives you power. You could eat at fast food places and avoid seed oils pretty well, right? Because you could eat things like at McDonald's, you could eat the hamburger, right? But you don't eat the French fries and you don't eat the chicken nuggets that are cooked in vegetable oils, right? So you can learn to avoid those things, and you can still eat out. I don't eat out very much. We try to eat out no more than about once a week, once or twice a week maximum, unless we're traveling. Um, and I'm careful when we eat out. We eat things like steak or sushi or something where we know we're not getting seed oils. When you're aware, and then when you're diligent about trying to get the seed oils out of your diet, you'll accomplish it.
Yeah.
But if you start focusing on real whole food, meats, fowl, fish, fruit, vegetables, whole grains, some nuts and seeds, and fermented foods, and you could do dairy, especially raw dairy would be really beneficial. These are the things that our grocery list should be made up of. And
Exactly.
we should be, again, the best thing would just be to try to take those foods and prepare them yourself. I cook almost everything in butter. Like
Mm.
that's the only thing. I mean, I do a lot of cooking, and because I just feel I have to,
Yeah.
to make it safe, and I enjoy it. Now that I understand this better. But anyway, uh, I don't hardly ever have a need to use any kind of oil. If I needed a bunch of oil, I would use coconut oil. And if you don't want the coconut flavor, you can even use refined coconut oil. This is one place where refined would be okay because the coconut oil, it's so low in omega-6, 2%, that not much can go wrong with it.
Hmm.
And the refining is basically just steam. It's steamed to remove some of the odor causing fatty acids in there.
Hmm.
And so that way you can consume coconut oil that doesn't have the coconut flavor. So
Right.
if you wanted to make French fries, like you can make anything you want in the world pretty much. And I know that low carb people will hate me for saying this. But if you want donuts, if you want apple pie, if you want French fries, you can make all these things with ancestral ingredients.
Yeah.
This is
They're
what
a lot better,
Americans,
actually. They taste
yeah,
so much better.
they taste fantastic. This is what Americans did in the 19th century. They loved their sweets. And this is why sugar consumption was already so high, even by 1900. I forget the exact number, but we were at 10.8% of the diet was sugar
Mm.
in 1890 in America. Here they are, no heart attacks, very low cancer, almost no diabetes, um, no Alzheimer's, no macular degeneration, but yet they were eating desserts commonly. And I'm not advising that this is what people need to do. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that did they eat their pancakes and their apple pie? And yeah, look at their cookbooks. Like a lot of those cookbooks from the 18th and 19th centuries, almost a fourth to a third of the cookbook was filled with desserts. And
Yes.
you can see it on the menus at all these restaurants and, I think what I'm trying to say is having this knowledge gives us power to control our diet and still have the things that we love,
Right.
because you can make it or you can find it prepared properly with ancestral ingredients.
Exactly. My husband and I always joke about how fast food could actually be health food. If you
Yeah.
had a grass-fed beef patty and you
Yeah.
had whole grain actual bread and not this
Yeah.
doughy refined bread, and if you had tallow as your fry oil,
Yep.
and you had, natural happy chickens that are laying happy good eggs and not being fed with corn and all these other different things, you could actually have fast food be a relatively healthy thing. The other thing that you said I wanted to touch on is making our own meals. We've actually discovered that making our own meals is surprisingly easy and tastes so much better. And I just want to encourage anybody listening, use ChatGPT, my friends, to just ask them, how can I make a recipe without seed oil and make it really easy so I can cook it in 20 minutes. Just give them all of the descriptions you need, and it will give you the most lovely recipe. And it's very simple. We've done that with a lot of different recipes.
I couldn't agree more. I do the exact same thing. I
Yeah.
just grown to love Chat GPT for a lot of things. I verify anything that AI tells me if it's really important. I make sure that it's all been verified,
Verified, right.
through
But for
scientific
recipes, it's
sources.
like the worst case scenario. I'm not going to like it, but at least the
Yeah,
recipe will be a
exactly.
good thing to try. So,
Yeah.
well, Dr. Kenobi, I am so grateful for your time. I'm so grateful for your wisdom and that you are taking on this battle to help shift our nutritional perspective so we can start seeing the connection between what we're putting in our bodies and the kinds of diseases that are surfacing. Before we wrap up, couple things. How could people find you if they want to learn more about the research you're doing there?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lisa. And I'm sorry, I should have said this at the beginning, but you called me doctor. So it's just Chris. I don't let anybody call me doctor. So,
Okay,
uh,
thanks, Chris.
all right. So I apologize for that. But anyway, so people can find me all over on YouTube. Lots of presentations and podcasts I've done over the past 9 years, I guess. And we do have, well, I have a website called Chris Kenobi. That's chriskenobi.com. We also have ancestralhealthfoundation.org. And I just want to try to, try to get this knowledge into the minds of more people. So,
Exactly.
but anyway, yeah,
Well
those are the
needed.
main ways people can find me and more. And they, I'd like for that to consider my book, The Ancestral Diet Revolution,
Mm,
available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. Um, and I don't profit from any of this. The profits from all of my book sales go into our nonprofit foundations, and no one gets a paycheck out of those in our foundation. So,
wonderful. Just helps
uh,
you further the research, I suppose.
yeah, that's all it does. It supports our operations and research. Yeah.
Wonderful. All
Yeah.
right. Well, then before we close up, my friend, what would be maybe one other encouragement or some other bit of wisdom? Anything else that you'd like to pass along to the listeners today?
If I just could say one thing that relates to what we're talking about, I think I would say to um, parents, for example, that um, to give your children the best possible ancestral food to allow them to grow into their birthright,
Mm,
which is brilliant health, is the greatest gift you could ever give your child. And, um, you know, I didn't know any of this when my daughter was growing up. She's now 26. And we honestly almost killed her a couple of times. She had a terrible case of pneumonia when she was 4, and she had a terrible gut problem when she was 3 or 4. And it was all because if I told you the food we were allowing her to eat, everybody would think I'm crazy, but it's just, I didn't, as a typical physician, I didn't understand any of this. So when you share this knowledge you can do it by spending, even with your like friends or family, like what can 2 minutes of just giving them a nugget of knowledge, and maybe it's a light bulb moment. You can save someone's life by doing this.
mm,
And that's the message. I would say you can change the lives of those around you. You spread this knowledge. And that's why I do this work. I already lost my sister and my dad to processed foods. And my sister Jan died 7 years ago at the age of 62 to metastatic breast cancer. And by the time I had learned, she'd already had metastasis by the time that I was beginning to understand these principles back in 2011 to 13. And but again, it's like one little nugget, one little um, message to a friend or family member even can change their life, can save their life.
Mhm.
What's that worth? And what you could do for your children is infinitely more, obviously.
So agree. I so
Yeah.
agree. It all starts with knowing. And once you know, you can make better choices. So,
Yeah.
well, Chris, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the wisdom that you're sharing, and I hope it will be as encouraging to others out there as it has been to me. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's been a pleasure. Been a pleasure. Thank you.
Chris is such a wealth of information and research and data, and I trust those numbers made an impact on you just like they did for me. I have 8 powerful takeaways for you today, and I'm coupling them with specific actionable things that you can do to start making a difference on your health today. So let's get going. Number 1, mitochondria are at the root of all chronic diseases. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, blindness, whatever it might be. All of these things connect back to a damaged mitochondria. So, what can you do? Start to heal your body by removing at least one of the things that's harming them the most, and that is these industrial seed oils. And remember, these seed oils, they stay in your body for up to like 2 years. So you can't just have a great week and then go out and binge on fried foods on the weekend. You need to really get them out of your body, my friends. So start paying attention to what is going in your body and just eliminate as much of the seed oils as you possibly can. Number 2, seed oils do not make us sick overnight. No, they slowly sneak up on us over decades. They quietly crept into our diet, and now they make up close to 1/3 of our daily calories. So, what can you do? Start by not accepting that chronic disease is a part of normal aging, because there's nothing normal about it. And start questioning instead what is on your plate. Order with more intention. Make dinner with more intention. Ask the manager or the restaurant manager what's in their food, and ask them to consider removing seed oils so you can make more choices on their menu. Number 3, the biggest dietary change in human history was the addition of seed oils. We went from cooking in butter and tallow and lard, all these natural things, to literally drowning our food in canola and soybean oils. I mean, that's exactly what we're doing when we're taking a basket of clean potatoes and dumping them into soybean oil. So what can you do instead? Well, reclaim those ancient traditions. Cook your meals in the safe fats that your grandparents used. Those animal fats like beef tallow, lard, and clean butter. So very much better for you. Number 4, seed oils are biologically toxic. I remember what Chris was telling us. They promote a biological rust inside us, which is called oxidation. And this literally damages the cell membranes and blocks energy production. So what can you do? Swap those seed oils out for those good, healthier fats like coconut oil, ghee, butter, olive oil, avocado oil, and those animal fats I just mentioned a moment ago. Number 5, the dose makes the poison. And sadly, today's dose of seed oils is massive. Remember, back in 1866, we only had 1 gram per day per person of seed oil. And today, we have 80 grams per person per day. You don't have to be perfect, my friends, but cutting your seed oil load, maybe even in half, could be life-changing. So just start little, start small, but start making some changes. Number 6, processed foods equal hidden seed oils. Those packaged snacks, condiments, and fast foods, even healthy crackers that you're going to find at the organic co-op, they are loaded with seed oils. Just check the ingredient list, and if they're in the first couple, 2, 3 of those ingredients, you know they're a pretty significant part of the recipe. So what do you do about it? Well, the only safe fix is to really start embracing that option to cook at home. Read your labels when you're buying things at the grocery store, and when you're eating out, don't be afraid to ask questions. Choose grilled if you can. And remember, sadly, there are really no healthy fried options. I'm sorry, there just are not. Now, there might be healthier fried options, meaning Fries made in a beef tallow are going to be better for you than fries soaked in toxic seed oils. But if you want to be healthy, avoid the fried foods altogether. If you want to enjoy a little treat once in a while, try to find the fries that are done in the beef tallow and animal fats and not the vegetable oils. Number 7, knowledge is power, but action is where you'll find freedom. Even making just one swap, choosing butter instead of margarine or olive oil instead of canola oil. Go ahead and trash the shortening. You do not need it and you really do not want it anyway. These changes can begin shifting your health trajectory. And you could start with just one meal, your favorite meal, the one you eat maybe most often, or just go all in. Clean out that pantry altogether and get rid of the seed oils, the canola oils, the soybean oils, and all of the shortenings, and get rid of them. You're not going to cook with it if it's not in your kitchen. So clean out the pantry, start replacing them with really good, healthy fats. And number 8, remember, my friends, you have so much more power than you think. And your story, the information you have to share, can save somebody else a whole lot of headaches and maybe even save their life. Sharing what you've learned might help a loved one avoid blindness, diabetes. It might improve their obesity or help them avoid or improve heart disease. Don't keep quiet on these topics. One conversation can really help change a life. It's really true that the food that our grandparents ate is not the same food we have now. So if anyone throws back at you, well, I've been eating that for 50 years and I'm just fine, the problem is it's not the same food. One day while they weren't looking, the food that they were eating was swapped for something that is actually very toxic to their system. So you just sharing the information can really help them open their eyes to how they can make changes in their health and grow old with grace and dignity and health instead of growing old and falling apart. If they don't like the information, that's okay. Just blame it on me or blame it on Chris or both of us. Just share the information, my friends, because that information is powerful. And that's a wrap on today's episode where we uncovered the hidden health hazard of seed oils. Remember, we started number 1. The first hidden health hazard was in the air we breathe. The second hidden health hazard was in the general food that we eat. And today's was the third hidden health hazard of the seed oils. But again, we've got some really powerful episodes still coming, and we have 3 left. So in episode 91, we're going to unlock the sleepy secrets of a good night's rest with Dr. Vicky Casper, because better health starts with better sleep. And then in episode 92, we're going to pull back that curtain to reveal the hidden health hazards in dentistry with my good friend, Dr. Tara Carr. And this one's going to really surprise you and inform you. This is actually one of the things that I needed to learn to fix my health, and you're going to be learning things to reclaim your health too. And then finally, we're going to wrap up this incredible series with the one and only, the charismatic and such a relatable researcher and scientist and professor of brain and cognitive sciences. I'm talking about none other than Dr. Susan Pierce-Thompson, and she's going to stop by to reveal to us how to harness our freedom so we can truly live healthy, happy, and free. So make sure you're subscribed and share this episode with a friend who's ready to ditch the toxins. And then get ready, my friends, because the next 3 episodes could really change your life. Literally, we've got a lot of great information coming along. So thanks for joining us today again, and I'll look forward to seeing you right back here next week at the Sunshine Cafe.